And we're live. Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling, man, on this Friday evening?
Hello, doing great. It's funny, it's becoming like a running joke in the show. Sometimes it feels like California summer is like half a year long, but we we were we were up to like the 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is I think is like 40 degrees Celsius even um, for you guys here in Europe. So it's been just roasting, lots of fires still. Lots of exciting stuff going on in the news, which we won't go into too much, not to date the show. But yeah, it's just been a pretty interesting season that just keeps going.
Right, man. And, I think today we have also a pretty cool case. I think it happened in a little bit of a colder area than you are from, if you know what I mean. I don't know, man. You want to give a little premise to us before we jump right into it?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting when you look at sometimes what makes a particular true crime event so famous and mysterious is that it'll usually be kind of a big flash of kind of super violence in a way that seems to happen to strangers, um, and often young people or children. And when something like this happens, I think the reason why it's become so mysterious and gets so much attention is because, in a way, it just seems so unexplainable. You can kind of understand when maybe someone goes crazy and attacks their own family, or a lovers quarrel, or some kind of feud ends up in a deadly you know consequence, or terminates in a way that is deadly. But when something happens out of the blue, you often wonder, like, what's the cause of this? And I've thought about this a lot, because you figure the world as a whole has had a lot of different wars going on for at least the past 100 years. This is 2020 when we're doing this show, and it's pretty fair to say that we've had almost uninterrupted warfare across the world. And in many cases, even the places that now are like the richest and most developed areas of the world, it's kind of amazing to think that a good, within the past 70 or 80 years, so easily within someone's lifetime, those places were just racked with intense warfare and bombs and just the biggest battles that there ever were. And I always wonder, coming out of those wars, how much of the crimes and the murders and things like that, how much of them happened because of just the ruined psychology of people coming out of that? Whether if you were a soldier in that war, or you just lived through it, you were in a city that was under siege, or were worrying about bombs and soldiers. Or I always wonder how much of the weird and horrible crimes that we see that seem random, seem certainly not deserved by the victims. I always wonder how much of it comes out of that. But then when you think about that, how much of it is just normal human nature? So how much of this just always happened, and we just didn't know about it because there was literally no one to write it down? Literally, this has been going on since the caveman era, and just there wasn't any newspapers or TV stations back then. Nobody was writing anything. Um, so then when you look at that, you almost have these groups of like culprits or villains. You have people that do things to people they know, like their family or lovers quarrel. You have people that maybe are injured by war. You have people that are opportunists. Certainly, there's people that see the opportunity, and because they themselves are psychopaths or sociopaths and lack empathy, they will victimize someone else and not really have any feeling for them, and just kind of violate society's rules to enrich themselves, and then decide not to leave any witnesses. And then sometimes you have that 1 to 3% of the population that is just has like antisocial personality and maybe some other kind of mental disorder, where they're a local weirdo, a local angry person, that person, that neighbor down the street, that kid in your class, that person that could never get along, who was always fighting. And then the older they got, and we saw this, in fact, with some of the cases we've done in the past, where some of the people that turned out to be like serial killers, they were also pretty bad neighbors. Like, people knew them as being like very erratic and very violent. So, it's worth thinking about sometimes, does this just happen from people that are literally insane, quote unquote crazy, and have they maybe shown warning signs, and that's why they become very solid suspects when something really terrible like this happens?
Right. Okay, man, so I think right about now we should be jumping into it. So without any further ado, today we're talking about the Lake Bodom Murders. And personally, I've heard about this case for a while now, and I definitely wanted to do it because I sort of really like these cases from back in the day. So the Lake Bodom Murders happened on June 5th in 2000. I mean, in 1960, right? So yeah, so it happened in 1960, and the cool part here is that 1 year prior to that, like the Dyatlov Pass incident actually happened. So what I'm saying, I think the next case should be from 1961 and so on. Like, we could sort of meet up somewhere like next year at like 2021 or something like that. So
We could do it sequentially, yeah.
right, or something like that. Okay, man. So I'm thinking we should definitely jump into it immediately. So from the pictures right now, you are seeing Lake Bodom. Obviously, if you it's not really pronounced Lake Bodom. I think it's Lake Bodom or something along those lines. Let's just call it however we are going to call it. So this lake is actually located in a pretty cool area. It's really right next to Helsinki, because whenever I jumped, whenever I was looking into this case, I sort of was thinking that this was sort of way deep into the countryside of Finland, but nope. This is literally by the city, and we will jump into the Google Earth map soon to pretty much show you guys the location, obviously, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel. So before further ado, let's jump into the story of what happened. So initially there were 4 campers from Finland. They were all teenagers at that point that went camping, and I will just name them really quickly. So at first we have Maila Irmeli Björklund. So she was a 15-year-old girl who was traveling with another friend of hers, Anja Tuulikki Mäki. So basically this woman right here, and these 2 women, well, at that time they were girls still. They were 15 years of age. They were traveling on a alleged camping trip with their 2 boyfriends. So one of the boyfriend was Seppo Boyzman. So it was this guy right here. So Seppo Boyzman was an 18-year-old teenager still at that point. He was an apprentice metal worker in a foundry, and he was actually traveling with his longtime friend Niels Gustafsson, who was also this man right here, and he was also working at also an apprentice at the same metal foundry or something along those lines. So they essentially arrive at Lake Bodom on June 4th in 1960. And actually, the first interesting part about the story is already that the boys actually, they told their parents, because at that point they were still living with their parents, they told them that they were just going fishing together, but they didn't mention the girls. But I think that's just like normal teenager stuff from back in the day. They also arrived at the scene pretty much with motorcycles, which is something pretty cool, you know what I'm saying, from back in the day, 1960s, to have like motorcycles back in Finland. I'm not necessarily certain how well Finland was doing economically for like teenagers to already have motorcycles there, but I think they weren't part of the Soviet Union, so they sort of, I think, had a little bit of a better economic situation down there. Now, I have that the boys during this camping trip were drinking alcohol, and I think this is proved by one of the girls' diary, because at the crime scene, because we will get into what happened to these 4 people. At the crime scene, there was a diary found, and one of the girls actually stated a little bit information in there regarding what was happening. So one of the boys was actually drinking alcohol. They also were fishing, just, I guess, camping, laughing, drinking, doing like like a camping, doing camping activities. Now, I will say that this happened in the 1960s. So teenagers back in 1960, they were, I think, still more reserved and things like that. So I don't think they were necessarily acting the same way like teenagers would act right now. So I think we should keep that in mind. I think they were pretty timid people, especially in Finland. There's like a big stereotype that, you know, Finnish people are like really calm and like really like closed people. Like they're not like outgoing or something like that. And even I'm sure we're gonna get like a whole bunch of Finnish people listening to this episode, and I think they will agree that at least the stereotype is definitely there. I mean, we have that stereotype about like Estonians and Finnish people, that they're like sort of like really calm and like always keep to themselves. So that's one thing to mention there as well. Now, the first interesting part regarding the story is that allegedly these 4 people, they set up a tent that they had rented from like a tent rental place back in the day or something along those lines. They set up their tent and they went to bed at midnight. However, from one of the diaries, we can pretty much read that at 2 a.m. in the morning, the boys actually went fishing. So I'm not really certain what that's all about. You go to bed at 12, you know what I'm saying, a.m. like, and then you go like 12 p.m. I mean, and then you at 2 a.m. you go fishing. Don't you think that's a little bit weird, man?
Yeah, I mean, unless, is that when like they're biting? I know a lot of fishermen fisher people like to go fish earlier, because I guess that's when the fish like to, you know, like overnight. That's when they're going. But yeah,
okay,
I mean, that's brutal. That's like 2 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
and then they're drinking all day.
Yeah,
That's a hell of a. I mean, I don't even know how they got, like, that's discipline. Like, maybe that's like the Finnish discipline, you know, like the all business. I'm gonna drink all day, sleep for 2 hours, and then get up at 2 to fish. Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, man. But then even the crazier part is that at 11 a.m., a local carpenter was actually taking his kids for a swim around that general vicinity when he stumbled upon the scene. And from the visuals, we can already see like the scene. So there were the remains of Anja and Seppo, who were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. They were found inside of the tent. They were dead at that point, okay? Anja apparently didn't have any stab wounds. Her cause of death was brain damage due to blunt force trauma. Seppo, you know, her boyfriend at the time. Let's also mention the fact that Anja and Seppo, like, they were boyfriend and girlfriend for like a while, and Nils and Maila were only like boyfriend and girlfriend for like 3 weeks. So they were like a new couple pretty much, but like Anja and Seppo were dating for like years at that point, I think. And, you know, Anja apparently didn't have any stab wounds, but her cause of death was brain damage due to blunt force trauma, like a really like blunt object hitting her head. Seppo, the boyfriend, had a broken jaw, cuts on the face, stabs on the chest, stomach, lungs, as well as throat. So that's a bunch of stabs right there. Maila, Nils's girlfriend, was left lying atop of the tent. She was undressed from the waist down, which is pretty interesting because she was the only person who had like something done with her, like clothing and things like that. And also, no one was sexually assaulted, so she was just undressed. That's pretty much the only thing that happened. And she also had suffered by far the most injuries from anyone of the victims. She had been stabbed a whole bunch of times, like multiple times. And also, like, the coroners, when they were sort of examining Anya's body, I mean Maila's body, I'm sorry, Maila's body seemed like it was stabbed after she was dead, and stabbed like multiple times after she was dead. So, you know, that's one thing to keep in our heads, that, you know, we have Anja, who has no stab wounds, and then we have Maila, who has like a million stab wounds. And then also we have the last person, Niels Gustafsson, who actually manages to survive the whole ordeal. He was found with a whole bunch of injuries as well. He was lying next to his girlfriend. He also had, I believe, stab wounds. He had a broken jaw, so just as Seppo, they both had like broken jaws. That's another interesting detail in this case. And he also had a whole bunch of head injuries, a concussion, as well as I believe like a slight case of brain trauma, because allegedly Niels Gustafsson, he was found still alive at 11 a.m. and he survived and he lived a long life pretty much. But the thing here is he could not recall absolutely anything from that night. So I don't know, man. You want to jump in a little bit? Like, how do you get so badly bashed in the head, allegedly, that you don't remember anything from the case? Don't you think that's a little bit odd that the last thing he remembers literally is like fishing with Seppo, and the next thing he remembers is waking up in the hospital? Don't you think that's crazy how there's not even a slight hint of like memory there?
It's weird. I mean, I feel like I've run into this before, maybe where people will have some kind of brain trauma and then they'll lose some amount of their short-term memory, and there's some kind of theory around that sometimes that um, some amount of shock when it happens, it might be like actually like due to shock that your brain, it's almost like preserving you. It's almost like your body and your mind protecting you from the trauma of what happened. So like rather than have you always flash back to that,
Right.
it's just like, you know what, you don't need to know. You don't need whatever it was. It's, you don't need to be playing that in your mind for the rest of your life. But yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that later when they like hypnotize people, then you never know if like whatever's going on replay, whether that's real or whether that's like suggestion, right? Which is going to come up in this case.
Yeah. Okay, so the another thing here is that we have the investigators who pretty much found the scene like this. Like we have a replica of that same exact tent here. I'm not sure if it's the original. I feel like it could just be a replica, or it might be an original, but it seems like it's in a museum, so who knows. So if obviously we're talking about a picture that we have put on our YouTube channel, if you want to go there for the visuals, then please do. And if you want to subscribe, do that as well. Okay, so we have people from the investigation. They sort of assumed that the attack weapons was a sharp object as well as a blunt object, so pretty much like a knife. It's pretty clear that one weapon was a knife. Now the blunt object, we don't really know what that was. That could have been anything because no weapons were found at the scene. The blunt object could have been a rock, could have been a steel bar, could have been really anything. So
I have to tell you, when I first read the injuries, you know what? Before I even read about like a pipe or anything like what comes up later, I was almost thinking it was almost like they were stomped out. You know what I mean? Like that's what I was, especially with all the head fractures and stuff. I was like, gosh, couldn't that just be somebody, who you're stabbing the crap out of them, and then whoever's in the ground, you're just kicking them in the head and you're just stomping them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then couldn't that big man doing that seems like that would be, I don't know, plausible. It's something that never really came up.
Yeah, that's definitely a good theory, man. I don't know why it didn't came up, but I didn't like. It's the first time I'm thinking about it, and it actually does make a lot of sense. In the sense, like, why would you bring a knife as well as a blunt object to kill people? You would pretty much bring one thing, like you would bring a knife or like multiple knives, and you would just stamp them out, I guess. That does make sense. As I mentioned, no one was sexually assaulted. The scene looked as if the assailant or assailants, because we don't know who did it really or how many people did it, it seemed that they cut the tent ropes and then started slashing people with a knife. So it would make sense. The tent was an old school tent. The model for the tent, from what I've gathered, was like from the 40s, so from like World War II days. It didn't have a zip up, like, I'm saying, like a zipper that you would like zip out of it or zip yourself inside of the tent. Like it was all done with like tent strings and things like that. So someone like cut those ropes. Now the people inside that were sleeping, the 4 people, they probably didn't know what was happening, and then the assailant or assailants started slashing them. And I think that would make sense, because how else would you kill 4 people, or at least that the person only killed 4 people, or 3 people. One person, Niels, was actually found alive. How do you expect to kill 4 people like without anyone escaping? These were like young, lively teens, like someone could have definitely like ran off. But I think in a situation like this, where you like cut the tent like down and you just like start slashing people, I think that's a viable way to try to kill 4 young teens, I guess. Now, there were a whole bunch of missing items from the scene. I think this is one of the most important facts here, that actually things were stolen. So the one thing that was stolen was the keys to the motorbikes, because let's remember, the boys had bikes and they had licenses and things like that. Now, those licenses were in the boys', I guess, I believe they were in their wallets, and the wallets were missing as well. The other interesting fact here, like really, really interesting fact here, is that actually the boys' shoes were found 0.5 miles away from the tent. Now, there's a little bit of a misconception where both of pairs of the boys' shoes were found there, or only Nils's, because I know for a fact that Nils's shoes were found like a while away, like some distance away from the crime scene. Some sources state that Seppo's were there as well, but I couldn't really figure out at the end like if both pairs were there or only like Nils's were there. But they had blood spatter. The shoes had blood spatter. Also, a bag was missing, a pair of chrome pliers, Seppo's jacket, as well as wallets and watches. So it's, I think we talked a little bit about in our recent episodes how, whoever killed people in our previous cases, they pretty much killed them for the sake of killing them. But in this case, I think there was a strong, like we could definitely say here that whoever killed them also sort of was stealing stuff, like stealing valuables. Like valuables were definitely missing from the campsite, and I almost feel like these types of valuables were like keys to the bikes, watches, wallets, chrome pliers. Like stealing chrome pliers is pretty crazy. I think whoever was stealing these things was like a practical person. Wouldn't you agree? Like it almost seems like like someone who was, what I'm saying, like a practical person.
Maybe that's almost like key to, like, I mean, either way, you could profile that person to say either it was like a young person who's just easily amused and dazzled by like new things, or it's someone that grew up during a harder era. So someone that grew up maybe during the pre-war era, and then in the war era where like there's not a lot of good things. So like, I mean, chrome pliers, that sounds like something pretty nice. Like you would look at that. Just even the other thing, even like the shoes, where like if the person took the shoes, one or both pairs, they're like, these shoes would be good for something, and then only like half a mile down the road, or they're like, hey, this is evidence that points right to me, and I don't know, maybe this isn't such a practical thing, but it's almost like someone who was really thrifty, who really literally didn't want to waste anything, so they're like, well, I did this incredibly brutal murder, but I got a couple of wallets and stuff out of it. I mean,
a jacket.
I'm up. Yeah,
a jacket.
Pliers.
Jackets, pliers. Like this is a, what I'm saying. Like this is a good day in the office for me at this point. Also, we have, scattered around the scene were a whole bunch of items. We have a table knife. We have some makeup items. We have food, cigarettes, gloves, partly full bottles of soft drinks and alcohol. So I don't know, man. Maybe the things that were scattered around the scene, maybe they were from, I guess, like the campsite activities, because I think they would have sort of not necessarily tidied up, while they were still camping there. Maybe that was the plan to do after, they were about to leave. So I guess let's jump into the investigation part of the thing. So, how we mentioned the police messing up on like a whole bunch of occasions. I think we have to go back to that a little bit here, because the police actually did not cordon off the scene, so onlookers actually strolled past and looked around. So that's a big fail in my eyes, you know what I'm saying? Like the police force, like I know that in Finland they are like really competent people and they're like really smart down there. That's like the thing that I always think about. Like when I think about Finnish people, like I always assume that they're like super smart, and that's why they're like always like so. That's why they always keep to themselves, because like they're like really smart and things like that. But at that point, to not cordon off the scene, it's a bit of a fail. But we don't know what was happening. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we really don't know what was there. You wanna step in for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I'm glad you mentioned it, because yeah, it's like that. This is like the running theme of our show is incompetence of investigators. And then I guess, the one thing, just to play devil's advocate and say, hey, fair is fair, is um, it just looks like, I mean, maybe to your point, because of kind of the stereotype around Finns, maybe it's easier to be good at something and like on top of stuff when like there's an established pattern to follow. But then when it's like new territory, um, even though technically it's your job to do that, if like they haven't had, a brutal murder like this, or they're not used to, they're not used to murders where it was like, oh, Carl got drunk and, beat his poor wife's head in, and that's, case closed. We don't need to do a lot of digging. I wonder if we saw that even with the John Benet Ramsey case, where it was like, not a small police department, Colorado Springs, same thing, where they kind of messed it up a little bit, and maybe it's just the heat of the moment. If you're only having like big scandalous murders and sensational things happening every 10 to 20 years, like that, that organizational knowledge disappears. And then when somebody's Johnny on the spot, and the spotlight's on them, they just whoops, and they kind of, so even the very orderly Finns get flustered.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But I will mention this fact that police actually asked 4,000 people for information, including 100 well-known criminals in the area. But this all obviously didn't lead to any leads, because we still don't know who actually did it. And the police investigators actually stated that these efforts were pretty much they were not like really successful and things like that. So let's jump into the first witnesses, because at least we have some witnesses. And now I will jump to the Google Earth map. So for everyone who is not watching this on our YouTube channel, I suggest, if you're really interested, what we're talking about, like it would be a good time for you to jump down there, because we have pretty much the Google Earth that I have set up, like the Google Earth document, where I have marked all the like areas of interest. So the first area right here, we have Lake Bodom. So as I've mentioned, Lake Bodom is actually pretty nearby Helsinki, which I did not expect. Like I knew the story before I started researching it, but I've definitely assumed that Lake Bodom was definitely like farther somewhere into the mainland of Finland, but it's actually pretty close to Helsinki. Now, what we're seeing on the Google Earth right now is from 2000 and I believe 20, or like recent times. So obviously back in the 60s, Helsinki was not as developed as it is right now, so it wasn't this sparsely populated. I mean, this much populated, but I guess it's still pretty close to the Helsinki center, like there's no way around it. And so we have the place of the murders actually happening right here. So let's just spin this Google Earth while we talk about it. At you see that point at 6 a.m. where like it just literally disappeared just now. I think it will reappear sometime down the line, right? So at 6 a.m., like bird watchers, actually two young boys who were bird watchers saw a man, because they were coincidentally passing by like pretty close to the tent where everyone was found dead besides Niels, obviously. Two bird watchers actually saw a man walking away from the scene, and they also saw a man laying on top of the tent. So they just thought that someone was sunbathing because it was summer. So that's what they were thinking, but who knows what actually was happening there. Who knows what that man, the man who was walking away, I think that's the main suspect. Now we have Olavi Kivliati, who also was a witness. Now he was a boy who was out in pretty much the lake area. I believe he arrived there at 4 a.m. in the morning, and he does recall seeing a strange man walking away from the tent as well. So we have at least 3 witnesses at that point who sort of indicate that a man was walking away from this tent right here in the direction, I guess, of like the city. And also the other interesting fact here is that we have the shoes with blood spatter found somewhere around this particular area. So, I think that sort of would correlate a little bit with the thing that you've said earlier, that maybe this man was a thrifty person. He took a whole bunch of stuff. He was carrying the shoes and he was walking in this direction, and he probably like dropped the shoe somewhere around here, because either they sort of dropped from like his like loot of goods, because he was carrying a whole bunch of stuff like bags, like things like that. And maybe they just dropped, or maybe he was like, these shoes already have blood on them, I don't want to keep them, I'll just throw them somewhere, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like now I'm thinking that maybe they actually did drop out of his like loot of goods by accident, because it's a pretty crazy detail to leave lying around, like blood, like shoes with like bloods. That's not a cool thing to do. So from the map, we can see that this area was where it happened. I don't know, man, you want to step in a little bit or not regarding like the 2 sightings before we jump into, I guess, the further?
The one thing I kept wondering when they talked about the person sunbathing was it possible at all that was Nils? Like it seemed like the way it's stated, you know what I mean? Like so I guess it's a coin toss whether it was the guy who did it.
Nah, man, I believe it was the dead body. I definitely believe it was already a dead body. But the boys, the boys were young.
Yeah.
So at that point, they don't sort of assume the worst. So they just...
By the way, this is like maybe it's because it's so close to Helsinki, but it's like, wow, for like these early morning hours, this lake gets a lot of traffic. You got like...
Yes. Yeah.
Little kids bird, like I can't even think of like any little kids I knew that would do bird watching when I was growing up in the 80s. But I mean, people would fish and stuff, but I mean, you got those kids, you got that poor dude who shows up at 4 a.m. and his friends don't show up for like hours, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess they ditched me. Yeah, like I kind of felt bad for that guy.
Yeah.
And then it turns out he can't really see very well, so his observations are not super helpful, other than like really blurry,
Now it's really
kind of time related. Yeah.
It's really funny that you've just mentioned the fact about his short-sightedness, because we have his like description of this man. So what Olavi actually said, what he saw, like the man that was walking away from the scene, he was between the ages of 20 and 30. He was between 5'5" and 5'7", had brown hair, and I believe it's really uncertain what type of hair it actually was. Dark pants, was wearing a light colored coat. So that's what the Olivi kid actually said. Now the survivor, Niels Gustafsson, actually spent 3 to 4 weeks in the hospital, and I believe, because he was the only survivor at that point, and he managed to survive. He couldn't recall anything, absolutely anything what happened. Now, as you've mentioned in the premise a little bit about like hypnosis and things like that, he was actually hypnotized, and he stated during the procedure, because I think you hypnotize a person and that's how you sort of expect him to remember things that are like sort of hidden away in his memory. He remembers an unknown man who was like his height was like in between 5'7" and 5'10". So 5'5" to 5'7" is what Olavi reported, and 5'7" to 5'10" is what Nils reported. I believe there is like I don't know, man. I think you could sort of say that they are describing a similar person. Had long blonde hair, combed backwards. Now, there's a little, little detail here that we have to mention is that in the Finnish language, like long blonde hair could also mean like sort of brownish as well. So we don't really know like if it was blonde or brown. He had big eyes, acne, thick lips, prominent jawline, a small neck, and was wearing a green and black checkered sweater. And we actually have the man right here. So this is like the description. I think it actually pretty much fits the description of what was like mentioned about him. Like, you have any thoughts about this man? Like, this man looks like a goddamn alien to me, you know?
He looks like a beast. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, did they say like a height and weight at all, or
5'7" to 5'10", but the weight was allegedly that he was like a thicker man, like a bigger man, like something like that. Like,
okay,
that's what
maybe
Niels.
220?
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess I was trying to think like in terms of someone who would have both the stamina and the strength to inflict those kind of, whether or not they use a pipe. If they did use a pipe, like just imagine, like you said, cutting down the ropes in the tent, and then everyone's kind of like, under the blanket,
yeah,
making shapes. And he's just swinging that thing at, the shapes underneath there and stomping on them. And then, maybe once you got the edge on them,
yeah.
you can finish them off. But yeah, wow. I don't know. It looks like some of our suspects we're going to talk about.
Right. The last thing, because I know that we sort of like predetermined that you will handle the suspects for this show. The last thing I have before we jump into that part of this episode is that also Niels remembers girls screaming, and pretty much the attacker having a knife as well as a steel bar. So like, the one thing I want to mention before we jump into the suspects, I find it really peculiar how you cannot remember absolutely anything. You undergo a hypnosis and you already remember stuff. Two things here. First things first, Niels was sort of a suspect for the investigators immediately, because he was found alive, even though I don't think he did it. We will get into those details. I personally strongly feel that he didn't do it because it wouldn't make any sense, but he was sort of a suspect. So how do you do hypnosis on a suspect? And then also these it's the first time I'm hearing about like hypnosis being used in like professional investigations. That just sounds like something you would do in the 60s actually. And the last thing here is, you could pretty much suggest a whole bunch of things to a person who is being hypnotized. You could probably suggest all sorts of things, and the man would be like, oh yeah, I do remember him having big alien looking eyes. Oh yeah, he had the green and black checkered shirt. Like, how do you remember like the details of the shirt? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think they were suggesting a whole bunch of things to him. And I guess it's time to jump to the suspects and theories. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, man.
Yeah, so like as you alluded to, there's three main suspects, and then there's some fringe theories. And I think while we will address some of the fringe theories, because maybe they're not so fringe, especially given what we've talked about and what we've noticed. I think as we go through the suspects, I think that all of us will kind of come to similar conclusions, and it'll be interesting to see the feedback. So the main suspect, especially initially, was what I alluded to in the premise of this episode, which was this guy named Carl Valdemar Gillstrom. And he was sort of suspect number one because he was known by the nickname Kiosk Man, because he ran a kiosk. And this is kind of weird because you figure if you run a kiosk, so by a kiosk we mean like a little shop.
Yeah.
So he had like one of those little stalls. When I think kiosk, I always think of like the old school like developing film kiosk that used to be like in the parking lots back before digital cameras. But
For real?
like of course. Oh yeah, for sure.
We didn't have those. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, be back, pre-late 90s, early 2000s, probably even still then, yeah, there was enough people with film cameras that, like, you'd be on your way to the grocery store and the strip mall or the mall, the area would have like one of those, and you just drop by there and then you'd come back out of the store and maybe the film would be developed already.
Right.
So yeah, but I mean, also, these days it's, for sure there's still people selling magazines, cigarettes, candy, stuff like that, especially in high traffic areas. And that's what I laugh again, because this like little rural looking lake, to your point, is like all, next to a major metro, and apparently there was plenty of traffic. So what was crazy about this guy is, for a dude whose whole job is customer service, he was known as like a notoriously harsh man, um, who ran this kiosk and hated campers. And here's a quote from Wikipedia: even going so far as to throw rocks at passing children.
What the hell?
So, and I know you have additional notes here that he was known for terror. I think we got this from some of the other research.
Yeah.
Known for terrorizing the entire town, known to carry around sharp objects. I mean, I can't help but wonder if maybe he like so he's very territorial, obviously, about the area, and it makes you wonder, like, what was he up to in the woods over there? Like, was he doing unsavory things? And that's why anytime someone went and camped in his little area, where, like, I mean, whatever he was doing back there with his time, I mean, like, he just basically felt like he owned it. So
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense. So yeah, apparently he had a drunken conversation with a neighbor at a sauna, which is also very Finnish and very Norwegian in general. And you mentioned here, drinking at a sauna can get you delusional for sure, because you're dehydrated, and your blood pressure is kind of up.
Yeah.
He allegedly confessed to this neighbor, but then, and this is once again in that same vein about what was going on with the police back then. They did not further their investigation after he questioned his wife. His wife provided an alibi and claimed that, oh no, he'd been asleep at home with her when all this happened. And the other weird thing was he'd been seen filling a well, which I don't really know why you fill a well. I guess maybe the well was out of water. See, a lot of people think that maybe this is where he put the murder weapons and any other missing items. Supposedly the cops.
I just want to step in for 1 second. Like, filling a well, I think I had to look into what that means. So just for our audience, filling a well is when you put like concrete inside of a well and things like that. So yeah, so one of the obvious theories is that he actually placed the murder weapons inside of the well, and then he filled it up like days following after the event, which I think you as well as myself definitely agree here that that's probably the most, it has to be the most dumbest place to hide your murder weapons, to throw them down the well. Like, what are you doing there, man?
I mean, it's the stupidest thing when you have all this wilderness. I mean, if you look at the map, I mean, the whole place is forest. Like, you couldn't just, especially back before DNA evidence, and fingerprinting was still pretty primitive. Yeah, I mean, but once again, people do stupid things. Look at the other case we covered with the religious folks that killed those two kids. Can't remember their names now.
The Jameson family?
Is that who it was? The one with the two little kids. The teenager and the autistic kid that got killed over here in the U.S. and Utah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, they buried the bodies on their property. So, stupid people doing stupid crimes do stupid things. But I guess maybe you fill up a well for safety reasons, because sometimes people fall down them. So maybe that makes sense why he was doing that. But yeah, once again, why put evidence of your crime? And supposedly they never did find anything, though. I really wonder if they bothered to hammer through 20 feet of concrete, or however much concrete he put down there. That seems like a lot of work. So, they never really found anything, supposedly. The guy drowned in the same lake. So I guess shows you that really was his hangout. They're not sure if it was accidental or suicidal, but he drowned in the lake. And on her deathbed, his wife recanted the alibi that she had for him and claimed that she was afraid of him, which does seem believable, and that he threatened to kill her
no kidding.
if she told the police.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's. So I think he's one of the strongest suspects. The next person. I mean, the next person. I mean, I think also gives off some bad vibes, but for various reasons, he's problematic. Even his name is problematic. At least if you speak English, his name sounds like a joke from like an '80s police academy movie. From the Blue Oyster. His name is Hans Asman. I don't know what that translates to in German. Maybe something better than it does in English. And this guy was ethnically German. So I believe he was a German. Supposedly he was an Auschwitz guard, as alleged. The guy actually had a habit of shooting off his mouth. So there's a whole bunch of things, bunch of labels he put on himself. He said he was like a KGB spy, which that doesn't, I feel like that's rule number one of being a KGB spy is don't tell everybody you're a KGB spy.
Exactly.
Especially around Alan Dulles, right? He'll throw you into a secret prison and give you LSD until you die.
Well, he was addicted to morphine, so maybe that was his plan.
Maybe that was, maybe exactly. He wanted to switch it up. I mean, which, it sounds like, honestly, the more I read about this guy, the more I think he's just mentally ill and maybe just desperate for attention and for people to listen to him for any kind of value in his life to other people, even bad value, negative value was something that he kind of sought after because maybe he really felt like a nobody. But he essentially had kind of gone back and forth. He'd come into the hospital, the Helsinki Surgical Hospital. His fingernails are black with dirt. His clothes are covered with red stains. Supposedly the red stains were paint. He asked the doctors and nurses for paint thinner to get the stains off his hands, which I was like, gosh, did they even have paint thinner at hospitals? That was just the back of my mind. Like
that's another thing that seemed really weird to me as well. Now, I just want to step in here for one more second for everyone who is watching this podcast on our YouTube channel. I just want to tell people that this Helsinki Surgical Hospital, now it was stated that it was nearby. It was actually pretty far away. Like it was literally at the end of the Helsinki area. And the other thing is he came there 1.5 days later, so approximately around over 30 hours after the fact. So he would have been pretty much wandering around, because he was one of the suspects. So if he did the killings, he would have been wandering around Helsinki for almost 2 whole days before going into the last place as a suspect you want to go is a hospital, you know what I'm saying, after you kill people. So without any serious injuries, there was no need for him to be there in the first place. Okay, there was no need for him to be there. Why would he had something on his fingernails, and he had paint on him, so he asked for paint thinner, and that was the reason why he went there. He didn't go there because he was bleeding. He literally just needed to wash away some paint. So also, I'm not sure if you would have mentioned this, but he had a strong alibi. He was staying with his wife, his wife's sister, and his brother-in-law. So the wife's sister's husband, his brother-in-law. Yeah. So it almost seemed to me like Hans was trying to discredit his own alibi.
Yeah, he was just trying to inject himself into the situation, which we've seen with other cases. We've seen like John Bonet's one of the most notable ones, where a couple of different losers literally tried to inject themselves into the case and essentially take the blame out of attention for, out of a desire for attention or other reasons. Maybe they're feeling guilty about other stuff. But when I look at this guy's photo, I mean, he does actually look like the drawing a bit. I mean, he's not that far off. I mean, his lips aren't maybe as thick, but obviously those drawings are that's made off of someone's hypnotic state. But yeah, I don't know. It's it's pretty interesting. Some aspects of it look the same, but yeah, I mean the guy, once again he said like, why would you even go to the hospital? You're not even hurt. And then it's like he would have had to run around for a day and a half, and somehow like the dirt's not coming out from his fingernails, and he's sitting there in that state for almost 2 days.
I will mention one thing.
Yeah.
One thing here. We didn't sort of emphasize his addiction to morphine. He was really like addicted to morphine. He was addicted to drugs. So I just want to mention this fact that
that's a good reason to go to the hospital. Yeah.
And if he did the killings, you know, like for everyone who believes that this guy did it, because the people who are really looking into this case, they're really like sort of looking at three people, like Nils, the survivor, Hans Asman, as well as the kiosk man, essentially. So the people that are looking into this guy, I think I will say, even though I don't personally believe that he was the killer, we will sort of sum it up at the end of the show, but I think I will mention the fact that he was a morphine addict. Now, I don't know what that does to your brain, but if you're like, just like do a big ass dose of morphine, like you go out and you kill a bunch of people and then you wander around Helsinki for a while, like that's not completely out of the question. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just feel like my stereotype of a morphine or a heroin addict is somebody who's basically passed out or half awake. You know what I mean? Like those, you see like people that are like basically asleep standing, or like Train Spotting. You know that movie Train Spotting, where they're just all passed out all over the place for a day and a half. Like that's, to me, I find it kind of hard to even see somebody, because I feel like those heroin addicts and morphine addicts, like when they're not just stoned off their head and passed out, they're like sick to their stomach trying to get their next fix, you know, because it's crazy for a drug that's so addictive. Apparently, like the withdrawal symptoms are like a really bad flu for like a week, and then if you can make it through that week or so, then you're fine. You're gonna be great, and you don't actually die, unlike alcohol, where like alcohol actually has potentially fatal withdrawal syndromes if you try to quit it cold turkey. You can quit heroin and morphine cold turkey, and it won't kill you. It'll maybe drive you nuts, but yeah, to me, I can't think of like for sure there's incidents of people on heroin like trying to rob people, but I can't think of like this kind of psychotic level mass murder. To me, that doesn't match the heroin addict stereotype or morphine addict stereotype. So yeah, I mean just from that, I mean there was one of the doctors, it looks like, who treated him, Dr. I don't know if it's Jorma or Yorma Paulo.
I think it's Yorma. I think it's
Yorma, yeah. He, or I guess it's a he, wrote a bunch of books, and sort of jumped on that gravy train, and some other detective tried to connect him to a bunch of unsolved homicides, and I don't know. It gets very, very conspiratorial with this guy, and whether he had political connections, and like suddenly he's like the center of this web of homicide and intrigue. I don't know. To me, he just looks like a big loser. So what happens is...
Yeah, the last thing about this guy, I just want to mention that I think his sort of story was sort of spinned a little bit out of control just for the sake of selling books, because people were just like really out there to make money, I believe. So I think his story was definitely like sort of, just there for the sake of like selling the story, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. One last thing. Sorry, man. One last thing. I just remembered. Now there's a whole bunch because we have to mention this fact. This picture right here, man. What do you think about this picture? Like, I'm just gonna leave it there and I'm just gonna let you talk about it.
And it's such a weird photo. Yeah. So that supposedly is him at the funeral, and it's like the person in the photo in the middle. You and I were laughing that it almost looked like a caricature, like a drawing of somebody. I mean, it's not like photos weren't faked back then. So part of me almost wonders if someone, with all the intrigue around this one guy, if someone sort of like the 60s and 70s version of photoshopped, which you could do. There was for sure fake photos. If someone had done something like that, because it's like this weird looking character. But regardless, whether this is the funeral,
It does look like this picture right here looks like the suspect drawing a little bit. Like I'm just gonna leave it there, man.
Yeah, it could be, and unfortunately, we don't have a picture of the first suspect, so we don't really know.
Gilstrom.
Yeah, we don't really have a good way to like compare between the two of them. I mean, regardless, so I mean, obviously, there's like this trope. There's this theory that sometimes, and it does happen, people that do a murder kind of hang around the crime scene and also go to the funeral and things like that. And for sure, that's happened. So it's not untrue.
Yeah,
I think that's the operating theory here. But yeah, I mean, also, it just occurred to me. I guess it makes sense that because of, you figure Finland only 20 years before that, not even 20 years, 15 years before this, had fought a war with first the Soviet Union and then, with Germany against the Soviet Union, and then I guess eventually got liberated or defeated in that whole war. Maybe they really did have like sort of communism and spies and intrigues and Germans and KGB and everything on their minds, because this was during the height of the Cold War. So, maybe I can forgive them a little bit for feeling that way. It's a lot more exciting than like, the kiosk guy, right? Who's just a nut, angry wife beater kind of guy who, just killed them because he's a jerk. Okay, but so what happens is, until about 2004, he, for a lot of people, was sort of the leading suspect because of all these books and conspiracy theories that came out. And then after they did new DNA analysis, they surprisingly, but maybe not so surprisingly because of what you said, because he was the sole survivor, they turned back on Nils Wilhelm Gunderson.
Gustafsson.
Or Gustafsson, yeah, sorry. I don't know why it's spelled wrong here.
It was I just want to say, on some sources, they said that his last name was Gunderson, even though it was Gustafsson. So I think someone like mixed it up somewhere.
That's weird. Yeah, maybe they got their Norwegian surname, or they're
Finnish
mixed up. So yeah,
yeah,
they're Finnish surnames confused. So it is a little weird. I mean, I guess it made sense because he was the only one that survived. I think. So here's the thing. Their evidence was that, his shoes had the other victim's blood on them, but not his own blood.
Yeah.
And he says other victims' shoes had blood inside of them, but Nils only on the outside. So based on that, they really did like a full court press on pushing that he was wearing his shoes during the attack, and therefore he was the attacker. And so it gets pretty convoluted because it becomes a weird mixture of like secret witnesses coming like 45 years later and making these very, very damning statements that are very detailed. And then when you look at them, like some of them were actually proven to be untrue. So there certainly was a kind of a poisoning of the well in terms of however this case was made. But prosecution's case was that, everybody's drinking, especially the two guys, and that a drunken Gustafsson killed his girlfriend Maila in a fit of jealous rage, which I guess would make sense given the kind of wounds, like you said, she sustained. It looked like she was just stabbed almost infinitely, and not the other woman. And this was not Anja, and this was thought to explain, why it had been found that way outside her tent, maybe also stripped down from the waist. And they thought that he had gotten into a scuffle with the other boy. That was the thing. So there was actually a secret witness. One of our research sources said that there was a witness who alleged that these guys had been kind of arguing about girls. I don't know what you would argue about, honestly. If you're, Like
Yeah.
the whole point of this thing was to have fun. You know what I mean? Like two couples having fun, getting drunk. What the F are you fighting about? Like, what are you getting? I don't know. I mean, it's true that people get, I've talked about this in other episodes. I don't trust people when they get drunk, because I've seen some people, unfortunately, react really badly to alcohol. We're normally really nice people. And it just baffles me, but I've seen it enough to accept that it's a real thing, for sure. So maybe that was just the case. Maybe one or both of them were just angry drunk types that, couldn't just be happy like the rest of us when they get drunk. And it turns into one thing and another. And like you mentioned, even though it's kind of during a period of stricter social mores, some things are universal. I mean, boys and girls get together in the teenage and adolescent years to be romantic, and maybe there's some kind of tension around that, especially like you said, the other couple was in a deeper phase of a relationship, and these two are more in the beginning, where maybe you haven't really gotten intimate yet, and who knows. So
One thing,
yeah.
man. Nils and Seppo were longtime friends, like really, really, really longtime friends from childhood. So them starting this fight to the death almost seems crazy.
Seems so odd. I mean, here's the one devil's advocate thing I thought about was for the injuries. So the theory was that they get in this fight, and the reason why they're both so messed up with like the face injuries and the broken jaw and the head injuries is that they did it to each other. So the sort of one guy won, Nils won, but he had he had sustained he lost a lot of hit points in the process.
Yeah.
And then sort of somehow finished off everybody, including all that stabbing of somebody afterwards, which I don't know. That doesn't seem believable to me, really. Like to somehow, even drunk or not, do a bunch of after death damage or during death damage to somebody when you're in so much pain and have been dealt so many blows. But the one thing I do wonder is, they were both, like you said, metal workers, so that does imply some kind of upper body strength. Certainly, that's not like a sitting at the keyboard kind of job. That's like a on your feet all day, doing blue collar stuff kind of job. So working with your hands. So maybe that kind of attenuates it. But yeah, once again, I don't know. Supposedly he was also the bigger of the two.
Yeah.
The bigger of the two men. So he was more likely to have kind of kicked the crap out of everybody than Seppo. But I don't know. We'll get into that at the end. But for whatever reason, the case had always been problematic, and supposedly he killed the other teens to dispose of witnesses, and then here's the part I find the least credible, that he somehow inflicted the rest of the injuries on himself. And we are going to contrast this with the episode we just did.
Yeah,
he had stab wounds on him. I mean, he had a broken jaw. He had head injuries.
Yep.
He had a lot of stuff going on here. So, it's pretty problematic. And I think even though we just did a case, which was it Cindy James?
Yep.
Where we think the victim actually did do a bunch of stuff to her. None of the injuries, other than killing herself, maybe accidentally, were anywhere close to this. So this is like a whole other, you know what I mean? Like, this wasn't just bruises and scrapes. This was like broken bones and head injuries.
I just want
to yourself. Yeah.
I just want to say that Cindy James, that knife through her hand, and when the note was pinned, that's pretty crazy to me, man.
It's crazy. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, she was, like I said, she was a nurse, so maybe she had painkillers, or I don't know. I mean, I find a knife through your own hand way more believable than breaking your own jaw.
Okay.
And
same.
And head injuries. Yeah, I mean, that's just my thought. But yeah, I mean, part of me was just when I read this, I was like, how could somebody ever do that to themselves? Like, it would just be, I don't know. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of someone even breaking their own jaw, intentionally. I don't know. It's just not something I've ever heard of for all that. Yeah.
Then fake stealing your own stuff, leaving your shoes 0.5 miles away, half a mile away, fake stealing your
which
stuff.
Which means you got to walk back again.
Yeah.
And then laying on top of the dead bodies of your friends for hours until someone finally
5 hours.
5 hours, and with a broken jaw. So like, I mean, that doesn't feel good, right? So I mean, it's not like you took a bunch of Tylenol or like Cindy James maybe morphined yourself up, before you did it. Like, yeah, I mean, it just, if he could do this, he should have accomplished a lot more in his life. So, yeah, what happens here is, eventually. Oh, and the other thing was there was like people, claimed that like he'd been acting aggressively around that. It just, the problem was a lot of these witnesses, a lot of these things were like, either the witnesses were like kind of these sudden surprise witnesses that really seemed like almost like the witness version of Hans Asman, where it was like, yeah, were you really there, or did you get all excited about this and imagine something or want to inject yourself into the case? Or, because that's without getting into specific cases here in the U.S., we've seen a lot of that, where there have been some very specific famous cases here in the U.S. in the past 10 years where all these people claimed that something had happened, and then when they actually got down to interviewing everybody, they never actually really saw it. It was, I heard this, and I know it happened, but like they don't. So because of this he actually won. He spent actually a year. He got a life sentence, believe it or not, for this. Just like this thing got railroaded through, but then it got appealed right away. He served an actual year of jail, of a life sentence. And he got a successful appeal, and he was awarded, you mentioned here, 44,900 euros, which at the time was about 58. Is that in the dollars?
Yeah.
Those days, 58.
Yeah.
About 58,000 US dollars in damages for time in prison and mental anguish. He suffered through the process, and he's, unfortunately for him, that acquittal was only the legal one. It seems like in the eye of the public, for many people, he's seen as being a likely suspect, and he sort of walks around with this taint now. And when people ask him questions, he just about it, like reporters, he says, "Oh, I'm innocent. That's that." So he doesn't really like to talk about it. So because of that, they don't really have any named suspects now. You have this note here, and I know this also came up in one of our the best video you sent over for research, which was a great one. This was someone else's podcast. They were like, they had an interesting, I got kind of confused about who they were saying did what, but they had some interesting theories about how it seemed like it would have been easier for outside parties that were maybe, instead of like crazy people, were maybe more motivated by, a combination of like material goods and kind of the usual highway robbery kind of motives. And did you want to talk about that real quick?
Nah,
before we got into the final.
I was thinking we probably should be jumping to the reactions, because regarding that, I think I will mention the podcast that I believe both listened regarding the show. I think everyone who is watching our show right now or listening to us should definitely like listen to those to that dude who did that show, because his like production quality is just out of this planet in terms of like audio. So I'll definitely link him up down there. I don't really want to talk about too much about those theories because I haven't personally looked into it. We just did like the more mainstream beliefs, and I feel like we should just jump into the finishing parts of the show. And I think I will let you take a bit of a break, and I will just pretty much tell what I believe happened there, or who I think is responsible for the murders at Lake Bodom. So I would have to say that I will immediately say that I don't think Niels did it. I just don't see how Niels would have done it, because for the fact that he would have had to like fake stolen his stuff, he had to also walk half a mile to put his shoes down somewhere in the bush and then just walk back and just lay there for 5 hours. So for me, that's completely out of the question. So I will definitely say that Niels, in my opinion, is innocent, definitely. Now, in regards to Hans Asman, I believe he was a bit of a attention seeker. there's no information that he was in the KGB actually, and he always bragged about things. Now I will say he actually did sort of self-implicate himself at the end of his life a little bit, like at his deathbed, but he never confessed. But the like self-implication actually seemed like something that he did for attention. The dude seemed like he was seeking attention pretty much at any corner, like, and at every opportunity he could, he was like trying to get some attention. I believe those books that the people wrote about him, I sort of feel like he liked them, like he just liked people talking about him. So I don't know, man, like for 1.5 days just to walk around after killing people. He was high on morphine, but at the police, I mean at the hospital, he didn't really like seem like he was on morphine. Sure, he was acting like crazy a little bit. He was acting passed out before a doctor actually poked him with a needle, and then he immediately like woke up and things like that. So I think it's too far-fetched that he did it. I mean, I think there's just so many like stupid stories in his life, you know what I'm saying, that I don't think he did it. And lastly, I will say that the kiosk man, Gillstrom, I feel strongly that Carl Gillstrom actually did a killing, you know what I'm saying. If someone did kill those three people and seriously injured Niels on that day in June 1960, I feel like Carl Gillstrom was the guy. Now why I say this is because there's a whole bunch of red flags in regards to his involvement. So firstly, he allegedly in a sauna he admitted to killing pretty much them. He also fit the description of a man that was seen walking away a little bit, even though I will say Hans sort of met that description a lot more, because I believe Hans and Carl Gillstrom, they were like, they had like a similar build. So actually Asman, he actually like sort of resembled the sketches a little bit more than Carl, but whatever. I also know that Gillstrom had actually cut camper tents in a similar manner before. So he was terrorizing people at the campsite. So he was cutting tents in a similar fashion. Like, if that's not the biggest red flag in the world, I don't know what is. I will also say that Gillstrom's wife said that she lied about that alibi, on her deathbed. So, and I believe her. I believe that her wife lied. I definitely think that Gillstrom was not with his wife on the time of the attacks. Like the well that was filled in days later. Now, you would say that it's pretty stupid to stash your murder weapons in a well. Well, also at the same time, it's pretty stupid to leave those shoes lying around half a mile away from the scene. If he was not giving a damn about leaving those shoes like near the scene, he would probably not even care about leaving his murder weapons anywhere, like, I'm saying, somewhere where they could be found. Like, he just seemed like an unstable person. Like, he drowned in the lake. It's not unsure if you drown or not, but like, he was living in the area. Surely he was aware of the dangers of that lake. Like, he was probably swimming there on multiple occasions. So I do believe there's a high chance that he probably killed himself, because he was a pretty cautious person, I believe, in terms of like at least like personal safety in regards to the general location, because he was from there, so he knew like what's up. So yeah, he was an unstable person. I believe everything is pointing towards Carl Gillstrom being involved. The only thing that sort of, in my mind, advocates for the innocence of Carl is the fact that there were actually multiple witnesses of a man walking away from the scene at 6 a.m. And surely Gillstrom, being the well-known terrorizer of the local populace, he would be recognized by these witnesses. But he didn't recognize, one of the kids, Olavi, he had like short-sightedness, and the other two kids, I'm not really sure how credible they're. Like, I'm saying, like witness testimony is really off sometimes. So I believe they could have just being off on that day. So yeah, I believe that Gillström was the culprit here. So yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave it at, and I will give it over to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really compelling argument on all those points, and I don't really have much to add on it. It's funny. I was thinking just in terms of the doing stuff to yourself part, and just rethinking it again. I mean, the theory about Nils doing those own injuries to himself. When you think about the way that people have killed themselves, sometimes even ceremonial, like you think of like samurai, where they did it, to like avoid losing honor, to kind of atone for something. None of them did it bashing their head against the wall. You know what I mean? It was always like if they ever did it, they didn't really have guns back then, so they did it with a knife. So it seems like that was the go-to for like the relatively easy. And then usually someone would actually cut off their head after they cut open their own stomach. But that's why part of me is like, what? I could see Cindy James really going for the gold there and saying, "Oh, no one will ever doubt me now." Chonk, into her hand. But she didn't slam her head against a concrete wall, because that hurts. That hurts way more even than stabbing your own hand. So that's why when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, this dude Nils, he didn't break his own jaw. That's crazy. But yeah, I just think like when I look at this, just exactly what you pointed out, this Asman guy, not Asman guy, the Gillström guy.
Yeah.
The Gillström guy was so territorial about the lake that he died there. I mean, this is like in surfing, there's something called localism. So locals on a surf spot are like the people that basically think they own the surf spot. And if you go to a place, there's like places that are famous for, like both in Hawaii, but even here in California, there's some very notorious surf spots where like you'll actually get attacked, or they'll like slash your tires or do other stuff to basically make sure you don't come back. And it's weird, like this guy was kind of like the local of this lake, where like slashing campers' tents and like just I don't know why he was in this heavy customer service job, that because he didn't really seem to like customers very much. But yeah, I mean it's just like I said, all these red flags, one after another about this dude. I mean, it just, maybe that's like the non-mystery of this mystery, is the culprit is all too obvious. It's the crazy, angry, territorial dude who's like, he doesn't just think he owns his house, he thinks he owns the lake. And you catch him on a bad day, even his wife's afraid of him. So what chance do you have if you're camping there and you catch him in the wrong mood? Yeah. So yeah, I'm right in agree with that. I feel like that dude's the likely culprit. So pretty interesting story. I'd never heard about this before you brought it up. So thank you for bringing this as the topic.
My pleasure, man. Right, so we will be wrapping up now. This was a pretty cool episode for me personally. Like, I felt quite strongly regarding the suspect on this case, because I sort of knew about this case. I looked into it a lot more now, and I'm happy I did. Also will mention that it sort of is fun to do these cases from back in the day. Maybe you can find one that happened in 1961 or something like that. Maybe someone in the comments section could give us some examples of some cool back in the day cases, like some international ones. So yeah, that's pretty.
Hey,
yeah.
You know what was missing? I was just thinking about this because
Right.
I saw another picture the other day. Remember how Dyatlov Pass, our first one, we were laughing because the pictures were like iPhone pictures. They were that good.
Oh yeah.
And like, that's what we're missing. We're missing the iPhone pictures. There's like none of that.
What?
Like, apparently the Russians got the iPhones in the time machine, and the Finns
That's
didn't.
crazy. That's crazy, man.
Just as a note, on that same vein, I saw Twitter the other day where someone had like colorized a World War II picture of like these two British, like, I don't know, airmen or something, doing like stuff in Wales, like some kind of backcountry thing. Dude, it looked just like an iPhone picture. It was amazing. I was like, this is not like now from an iPhone. So I guess sometimes people got the good cameras back then. Really, goes to show you, film really was the gold standard for a long time until like the past 10 years, digital cameras. But anyway, yeah. Next time we do one of these old timey cases, I hope that we'll we'll catch another one with just beautiful photos, because I don't know what was more tragic, that all those people died at Dyatlov, or that we missed out on a bunch of beautiful photographers not making more great photos, 'cause they were pretty awesome.
Exactly. These pictures were like not that good here, so yeah. I mean, especially the one at the funeral. Okay, so yeah, guys, as always, I hope everyone enjoyed the show. We won't keep you up any longer, guys. Stay safe as always. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy this content. Leave a like and things like that. Leave a comment somewhere. What do you thought about this show? What do you think about these theories? Do you agree with us? Maybe we missed something. We want to hear your guys' feedback. And catch us on the next week's episode. And as always, guys, just stay safe and, just peace out.